January 24th, 1925, 11:47 p.m. The Hawthorne Inn, Cicero, Illinois. A two-story brick building on 22nd Street that served as headquarters for the Chicago outfit's operations west of the city. 12 rooms upstairs, a restaurant and bar downstairs, a back office where the real business happened. In that back office, at a mahogany desk covered in ledgers and cash receipts, sat Al Capone, 25 years old, second in command of the organization, loyal, efficient, the enforcer who made sure Johnny Torrio's orders were carried out to the letter. Across from him sat Frank Nitti, the accountant. To his left, Jake Guzik, the business manager. To his right, Tony Lombardo, who handled political connections. They were waiting, all of them, waiting for Johnny Torrio to arrive for the weekly meeting he never missed. Except Johnny Torrio wasn't coming. At that exact moment, Johnny Torrio was 3 miles away in a different room having a very different conversation with federal prosecutor George E.Q. Johnson and a stenographer taking down every word. Johnny Torrio was 43 years old. He'd built the Chicago outfit from a street gang into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Bootlegging, gambling, prostitution. He'd survived wars with the Irish North Side gang. He'd navigated politics, police, judges. He'd turned prohibition into profit. But 6 weeks ago, he'd been shot, 5 bullets outside his apartment on South Clyde Avenue. The Jenna brothers settling a score. He'd survived, barely, spent 3 weeks in the hospital, and while lying in that hospital bed, tubes in his arm, pain in his chest every time he breathed, Johnny Torrio had made a decision. He was done. Done with the wars. Done with looking over his shoulder. Done with Chicago. But you don't just walk away from an organization like the outfit, not without consequences. Not unless you have insurance. So Johnny Torrio had made a deal with the feds, with George E.Q. Johnson, who'd been building a case against the outfit for 2 years. Torrio would give them names, dates, locations, financial records, everything they needed to build cases against the outfit's operations. In exchange, he'd get immunity and safe passage out of Chicago, out of Illinois, out of the country if necessary. The only problem was Al Capone. Capone, who'd been with him for 5 years. Capone, who'd carried out orders without question. Capone, who believed in loyalty above everything. Capone, who trusted Johnny Torrio completely. And Johnny Torrio, sitting in that federal office at 11:47 p.m. on January 24th, 1925, was about to betray that trust. "The main warehouse is on South Wabash," Torrio said to the prosecutor. His voice was tired, strained. The bullet wounds still hurt when he talked. "3rd floor. They bring the Canadian whiskey in through Detroit, truck it down to Chicago every Tuesday and Friday. Capone oversees the distribution personally." The stenographer's fingers moved across the keys, click, 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 recording every word. "How much product moves through that warehouse monthly?" Johnson asked. "Roughly 5,000 cases, maybe more in December." "And the profit margin?" "About $200,000 a month, after paying off the police, the politicians, the truck drivers." Johnson made notes. "Who specifically receives payments? Names?" Torrio hesitated, just for a second. Then he started listing names. Aldermen, police captains, judges. Men who'd been on the outfit's payroll for years. Men Capone knew personally. Men Capone trusted. Back at the Hawthorne Inn, Capone looked at his watch. 11:52 p.m. "He's never this late," Nitti said quietly. Capone didn't respond, just stared at the door, waiting. 5 more minutes passed. Then the phone on the desk rang, loud in the quiet office. Capone picked it up. "Yeah?" The voice on the other end spoke for 30 seconds. Capone's expression didn't change. He listened, said nothing. When the voice stopped, Capone said 2 words. "You sure?" Another 10 seconds. Then Capone hung up. He sat there, receiver still in his hand, staring at nothing. "Al?" Guzik asked. "What is it?" Capone set the phone down slowly, carefully, like it was made of glass. "That was Mickey," Capone said. "Mickey O'Brien, one of their street watchers. A kid who sat in a car outside the federal building downtown, noting who came and went. He says Johnny went into the federal building 2 hours ago. Hasn't come out." The room went silent. "Maybe it's nothing," Lombardo said. "Maybe he's got business with—" "At midnight?" Capone interrupted. His voice was quiet, too quiet. "What business happens at midnight with federal prosecutors?" Nitty stood up. "We should call our lawyers, find out what's—" "No," Capone said. He stood up from the desk, walked to the window, looked out at 22nd Street. A few cars passing, a streetlight flickering. Normal, ordinary. If Johnny's talking to the feds, calling lawyers just lets them know we know. We wait. "Wait for what?" Guzik asked. "For Johnny to come back," Capone said, "and explain." But Johnny Torrio didn't come back that night, or the next day, or the day after that. 3 days of silence. 3 days of Capone running the operation, keeping everything moving, pretending nothing was wrong. 3 days of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on January 28th, 6:15 a.m. Federal agents raided the South Wabash warehouse, confiscated 4,200 cases of Canadian whiskey, arrested 8 men, seized the trucks, the distribution records, the cash on site. By 9 a.m., 3 more locations had been hit: the gambling house on West Madison, the speakeasy on South Halsted, the brothel on East 22. By noon, 47 men had been arrested, and every single raid had been surgical, precise. The agents knew exactly where to go, what to look for, who to arrest. That kind of precision only came from one source: someone inside. Capone sat in the back office of the Hawthorne Inn with the morning newspapers spread across his desk. Federal raid cripples Chicago outfit. Torrio lieutenant arrested in massive sweep. Prosecutors claim insider information led to raids. He read each article slowly, carefully. When he finished, he folded the newspapers, stacked them neatly, and set them aside. Nitty, Guzik, and Lombardo sat in silence, watching him, waiting for the explosion, for the anger, for the reaction. But Capone just sat there, calm, still. Finally, Lombardo spoke. "Johnny sold us out." Capone didn't respond. "He gave them everything," Guzik added. "The locations, the routes, the names. This wasn't a lucky raid. This was insider information." Nitty leaned forward. "We need to find him before he gives them more." Capone looked up. "He's gone. Probably left the state already. The feds gave him immunity, safe passage. He's not coming back." "Then what do we do?" Lombardo asked. Capone stood up, walked to the window again. The same window he'd looked out 3 nights ago. "We rebuild," Capone said quietly. "We rebuild?" Nitty's voice carried disbelief. "Johnny just handed the feds our entire operation on a silver platter. Half our men are arrested. Our warehouses are empty. Our payroll's been exposed, and you want to rebuild?" Capone turned around. "What else is there?" The question hung in the air. "We can run," Guzik said. "Get out of Chicago, start somewhere else. New York, maybe, Detroit. And let the feds think they won?" Capone shook his head. "No, we stay. We rebuild. We do it smarter." "How?" Capone walked back to the desk, sat down, pulled a blank piece of paper from the drawer, drew a line down the middle. On the left side, he wrote one word: before. On the right side, after. "Before," Capone said, pointing to the left column, "we ran the operation Johnny's way, centralized. Everything flowed through one warehouse, one set of books, one chain of command. Efficient, but vulnerable. One person talks, everything falls." He tapped the right column.
After. We decentralize. Multiple warehouses, multiple distribution chains, multiple sets of books. If the feds hit one location, they get one piece, not the whole operation. Nitty was listening now. Go on. Before, we paid people in cash, left a trail, made it easy for someone like Johnny to hand over records, Capone continued. After, we use intermediaries, shell companies, legitimate businesses that handle the money. The speakeasy pays the restaurant pays the construction company pays the officials. 3 layers between us and them. That's more complicated, Guzik said. It's supposed to be, Capone replied. Complicated means harder to trace, harder to prosecute. Lombardo nodded slowly. What about the men who got arrested? We take care of their families, Capone said immediately. Rent, food, medical, whatever they need. We send the message that if you stay loyal, we stay loyal. Nobody talks because nobody needs to talk. And if someone does talk, Nitty asked. Capone's expression didn't change. Then they learn that betrayal has consequences. But we don't make that our first move. We make loyalty the better option.
Over the next 6 months, Al Capone rebuilt the Chicago outfit from the ground up. He decentralized operations exactly as he'd outlined, created shell companies to hide money flows, diversified income streams beyond bootlegging into legitimate businesses, bakeries, laundries, restaurants. He took care of the families of arrested men, paying their bills, making sure their kids stayed in school. He sent the message that loyalty was rewarded, that the organization didn't abandon its people. And slowly, carefully, he built something stronger than what Johnny Torrio had created, something more resilient, something that couldn't be destroyed by a single betrayal. By the summer of 1925, the outfit was operating at full capacity again. New warehouses, new distribution routes, new political connections. And Al Capone, no longer the second in command, was now the undisputed boss of Chicago. On July 12, 1925, a letter arrived at the Hawthorne Inn, postmarked from Naples, Italy, no return address. Capone opened it alone in his office. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, Johnny Torrio's handwriting. Al, by the time you read this, you'll know what I did. You'll know I made a deal with the feds. You'll know I gave them information that hurt the organization. I won't insult you by making excuses. I was tired. I was shot. I wanted out, and I took the coward's way. I betrayed you. I betrayed the organization. I betrayed everything we built together. I know you're probably angry. You have every right to be. But I also know you're smart. Smarter than me, maybe. Smarter than I gave you credit for. You'll rebuild. You'll make it stronger. You'll learn from my mistakes. And one day, you'll run Chicago in a way I never could. I'm sorry, Al, for what that's worth. J. Capone read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully, walked to the fireplace in his office, and dropped it into the flames. He watched it burn, watched the paper curl and blacken, watched Johnny Torrio's words turn to ash. When the last ember faded, Capone walked back to his desk and sat down. There was work to do. There was always work to do. Frank Nitti knocked on the door, entered with a stack of reports. The new warehouse on Cicero Avenue is operational. First shipment arrives tomorrow. Good, Capone said. What about the restaurant on State Street? Opening next week, fully licensed, fully legitimate. And the alderman from the 7th Ward? Paid, no problems. Capone nodded. Then we're ahead of schedule. Nitti hesitated. You think Johnny expected this? That we'd bounce back this fast? Capone looked up. Johnny expected me to be angry, expected the organization to fall apart without him. He went back to reviewing papers. That's why he never understood what we're building. Years later, in 1939, a reporter interviewing Capone about his rise to power asked about Johnny Torrio. They say Torrio betrayed you to the feds in 1925, that he gave them your entire operation. Is that true? Capone, older now, heavier, his face showing the years, considered the question. Johnny made a choice, Capone said finally, a choice to save himself. Can't say I wouldn't have done the same if I was in his position. Bullet wounds change a man's perspective. But he destroyed your organization, the reporter pressed, handed it to the government. Capone smiled, not a happy smile, a knowing one. He handed them what we were, not what we became. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to an organization is having to rebuild from the ground up. Makes you fix all the weak spots you didn't know were there. So you're saying Torrio did you a favor? I'm saying Johnny taught me a lesson, Capone replied. Trust is important, but systems that don't depend on trust are more important. Build something that can survive betrayal, and you've built something that can survive anything. That lesson, learned in January 1925 when Johnny Torrio walked into a federal building and gave up everything Al Capone had helped him build, became the foundation of how Capone ran Chicago for the next 6 years. Not through fear alone, not through loyalty alone, but through a system resilient enough to survive both betrayal and enforcement. And when Al Capone finally fell in 1931, it wasn't because someone betrayed him. It wasn't because his organization collapsed. It was because the federal government, after years of trying to break his empire through raids and arrests, finally found the one thing he couldn't insulate against: taxes, the one paper trail even shell companies couldn't hide. But by then, Capone had already done what Johnny Torrio thought was impossible. He'd taken a broken, betrayed organization and turned it into something that would outlast them both.